Good morning and welcome, everyone. In the next 25 minutes, I will present some of the research I've carried out as part of my PhD in public health here at the University of Montreal. The title of this presentation is Socio-Economic Position Early in Life Associated with Physical Activity During Adulthood, Following the Accumulation of Risk Model with Additive Effects. I'd like to begin by showing you this. Who has seen this? Most people have seen it. It's Canada's food guide to healthy eating. And most people have heard that Health Canada recommends that you eat from 5 to 10 servings of fruits and vegetables a day. But few people have seen this guide. This is Canada's Physical Activity Guide. And does anyone know the recommendation for physical activity in Canada? Few people know it. The updated recommendation in 2011 says that you should be doing 150 minutes of physical activity a week. And a good way to do that is to do 30 minutes on 5 days a week. 30 minutes, 5 days a week, that's 150 minutes, and this is also the recommendation in the US. Why should you do physical activity? Well, for your health. And unfortunately, only 4.8% of adults in Canada meet the recommended level. This increases their risk of cardiovascular diseases, cancers, metabolic disorders, musculoskeletal diseases, and psychiatric disorders. The costs attributed to physical activity amount to $1.6 billion in direct healthcare costs and have been estimated at $3.7 billion for indirect costs such as days of work missed. This represents 2.6% of total healthcare costs in Canada. And the problem is not just in Canada. In 2009, the World Health Organization ranked physical inactivity as the fourth leading risk factor for global mortality. Physical activity was responsible for 3.2 million deaths each year. That is 6% of all deaths. More deaths were attributable to physical inactivity than to overweight and obesity, or high cholesterol, which was ranked 6th. Why are adults not physically active? Well, experts agree that physical activity is a complex behavior with many correlates at the individual, environmental, and social levels. At the social level, correlates include socio-economic position and social support. Socio-economic position is a word you'll hear me say perhaps 100 times in the next 20 minutes, so I might refer to it as SEP for socio-economic position. SEP, this is measured in practice by things like income, education, and occupation, that is your job or the work you do. And systematic reviews have established that socioeconomic position is associated with physical activity cross-sectionally during adolescence and cross-sectionally during adulthood. Cross-sectionally means measured at the same time. So when SEP and physical activity are measured during adolescence, they're associated, and when they're measured during adulthood, they're associated as well. But what is the nature of this association? Are the associations between SEP and physical activity during adolescence and adulthood purely cross-sectional? Or is there a long-lasting life course association between SEP early in life and physical activity during adulthood? If there is a life course association, to what extent is it mediated by SEP during adulthood? Are the associations during adolescence and adulthood independent and additive? Or is the association for adolescence entirely mediated by SEP during adulthood? There is evidence for a life course association. It comes from two outcomes in adulthood closely related to physical activity: obesity and cardiovascular diseases. These two outcomes have a life course association with SEP during childhood. So perhaps we should target childhood. If there is a long-lasting life course association, arguably the potential for prevention is greater for childhood, as an increase in physical activity during childhood is likely to be maintained throughout the life course. Children who are more active tend to become adults who are more active as well. This would have a double benefit. The first one would be to increase physical activity levels, and the second one would be to reduce social inequalities in physical activity and in health, which is a key priority at the international and Canadian levels. Our research goals. The goal was to determine if there is a life course association between SEP early in life and physical activity during adulthood. If there was one, a second goal was to determine which theoretical model in life course epidemiology best described its pattern. 3 models were compared: the accumulation of risk model with additive effects, the accumulation of risk model with trigger effect, and the critical period model. We will see these models in a few minutes. Following the accumulation of risk model with additive effects, we hypothesize that SEP during childhood, during adolescence, and during adulthood are associated with physical activity during adulthood directly, irrespective of later exposure. This is an independent association. And also indirectly through socio-economic position later in life. This is mediation. Original research. We did 3 studies: a systematic review, an original research paper using UK data, and an original research paper using Canadian data. In our systematic review, we aim to summarize the evidence linking SEP early in life and physical activity during adulthood. Medline and Embase, those are databases of scientific papers, were searched for studies that assessed SEP before age 18 years and physical activity at age 18 years or more. Studies were rated according to 3 key methodological quality criteria. The first one was childhood SEP assessed prospectively. Second was SEP during adulthood included in the statistical analysis. Third was a validated instrument used to measure physical activity. We found 10,619 studies. Based on title, we retained 653. We then read the abstract, which is a 300-word summary, and we retained 135. We read the full text of these papers, and we kept 48 which had data on SEP before age 18 years and physical activity at age 18 years or more. We then reviewed the reference lists of these studies. We found 2 more, which brought our total to 50. And then we found 8 studies that used the same data as other studies, in which case we kept the more recent study. We excluded 8 studies this way, so we ended up with 42 studies that were included for review. Results. The results are summarized in this table. We looked at all studies first, and then we looked at those with more rigorous methodology. looking at all studies and all types and measures of physical activity. We found 42 studies, and of those, 61.9% found a significant association between SEP early in life and physical activity during adulthood. We then looked at leisure time physical activity only. Leisure time physical activity is the outcome that has been the most studied, and it has been the only focus of public health recommendation in the past. 31 studies had leisure time physical activity as their outcome, and among those, 67.7 found a significant association. Next, we looked at studies with more rigorous methodology. These were studies that met at least 2 of the 3 quality criteria I mentioned a minute ago. 21 studies met 2 of the 3 criteria, and among those, 71.4% found a significant association. And in this subset of studies with more rigorous methodology, in those that looked at leisure time physical activity as their outcome, 80% found a significant association. We concluded that the bulk of the evidence supported the hypothesis that there is indeed a long-lasting life course association between SEP early in life and physical activity during adulthood. We also concluded that this hypothesis was supported more consistently for leisure time physical activity and in studies using more rigorous methodology. Next paper was an original research paper using UK data. It aimed to determine how social class across the life course is associated with physical activity during adulthood. We used structural equation modeling to compare 3 theoretical models in life course epidemiology: the accumulation of risk model with additive effects, the accumulation of risk model with trigger effect, and the critical period model. We used data on social class at ages 0, 5, 10, 30, and 34 years, and physical activity at age 34 years in the 1970 British birth cohort, which is a non-going, multidisciplinary, nationally representative cohort of British subjects born the same week in 1970 in the UK. A note on structural equation modeling. This is a structural equation model. In the boxes, we see the variables studied in the model. The boxes at the top illustrate social class at ages 0, 5, 10, 30, and 34. The box at the bottom is physical activity at age 34. The arrows illustrate hypothesized associations between these variables. In structural equation modeling, the model has an underlying set of parameters that correspond to the path coefficients, the covariances, and the variances among all variables in the model. These parameters are then combined using covariance algebra to produce an estimated population, an estimated population covariance matrix. This matrix is then compared to the sample covariance matrix, and we hope that the difference is small and not statistically significant. In other words, we hope that our model, such as this one, fits the data we have collected. This can be measured using indices of fit. We will see 6 of those in the next minutes. Also, multiple models can be tested and compared to find the model that fits the data best. This can be considered to be the best model. A covariance matrix looks like this, and these are the 3 theoretical models in life course epidemiology. Model 1 on the left has a path between social class at each age and social class at the next age. In other words, we expect that social class will predict social class at the next age. Social class at all ages also have paths to physical activity at age 34. This means that we expect that social class at each age will predict physical activity at age 34 directly and indirectly through social class later in life. In the second model, the accumulation of risk model with trigger effect, social class at each age predicts social class at the next age, but only social class at age 34 predicts physical activity at age 34. The effect triggers at age 34, and social class earlier in life has no direct effect, only an indirect effect through social class measured at the same time as physical activity. Finally, in the critical period model, only social class early in life at ages 0, 5, and 10 predict physical activity at age 34. This would be called a critical period because processes at that age would influence physical activity later in life with no or little effect of social class later in life. Are you excited to find out which model won? So these are the results of our analysis for physical activity during leisure time in the UK data. For clarity, we will zoom in on the top of the table. This is the same table. This is the top. We'll look at two fit indices, the AIC, or Archaic Information Criterion, and the BIC, the Bayesian Information Criterion. For these indices, there are no guidelines or cutoffs. What we want is a low value. The lower the value, the better the model fits. We see that for men, the lowest value is in the accumulation of risk model with additive effects. Same story for women, lowest value for the accumulation of risk model with additive effects. This is the lowest value. And we found the same thing for BIC. Let's look at parameters now. For men, this is the first column. We see that social class at each age predicts social class at the next age. The estimates for path coefficients were statistically significant. For the logistic portion of the model, that is the probability of doing no physical activity at all, in men, only social class at age 5 years was a significant predictor. For women, social class at all ages were predictors except for social class at age 5. For the counts portion of the model, that is the count of physical activity score, the higher the count, the more physical activity. Social class at all ages were significant predictors for men and for women. Next, we will look at physical activity at work. For physical activity at work, once again, the accumulation of risk model with additive effects fit the data best. We see that the values of both AIC and BIC are lowest for this model in both men and women. Parameter estimates. Social class at all ages predicted social class at the next age for men and women. Social class at ages 0, 30, and 34 were significant predictors of physical activity at work in men. In women, only social class at ages 30 and 34 were significant predictors. In the counts portion of the model, in men, only social class at age 34 was a significant predictor. and in women, social class at ages 30 and 34 were significant predictors. Next, looking at physical activity during transports, model fit. Once again, we find that the accumulation of risk model with additive effects has the lowest AIC and BIC. Looking at the results in men, no parameter was statistically significant. In women, social class at all ages were, and social class were significant predictors of social class later in life, and social class at ages 0 and 10 were significant predictors of using active transportation, that is, doing physical activity during transports. We concluded that the accumulation of risk model with additive effects fit the data best for all three outcomes of physical activity: leisure time, work, and transports, for both men and women. We also concluded that social class at birth and at ages 0, 5, 10, 30, and 34 years were associated with physical activity during adulthood additively and independently of social class later in life. This corresponds to the accumulation of risk model with additive effects. Although the magnitude and the direction of associations varied by physical activity outcome and by sex, we have just seen this. Finally, we concluded that structural equation modeling appeared to be a helpful tool in selecting among competing models in life course epidemiology. The next paper used Canadian data. It aimed to determine which life course model best represented the association between education and income across the life course and physical activity during adulthood. Once again, we used structural equation modeling, and we compared three models. We used data on education and income at ages 8, 9, 14, 15, 22, 23 years, and physical activity at age 22, 23 years, and the National Longitudinal Study Survey of Children and Youth, which is a Canadian, nationally representative prospective cohort. These are the three models we tested and compared. Once again, you can see the accumulation of risk model with paths between education or income at each point of the life course and physical activity during adulthood. You can see the trigger effect model with a path only for education or income at the same age that physical activity is measured. And you can see the critical period model with a path between education or income at age 8, 9 years and physical activity at age 22, 30, 23 years. Let's look at the results for men for education. Here we have different fit indices, and we will zoom in. First, we have chi-square, its degrees of freedom, and p-value. We want this p-value to be small and not statistically significant. Actually, I made a mistake. We want this p-value to be high and not statistically significant. A high p-value indicates low discrepancy between the estimated population covariance matrix and the sample covariance matrix. The other indices, for the next index, we want a low value, but for this one, we want a high value. So for education in men, we see that models 1 and 2 have values below 0.05, which is considered statistically significant. So by default, these models are rejected. We conclude that they do not fit the data. Model 3, the critical period model, has a p-value above 0.05, it means that it is not rejected. It is not rejected, and it is a winner in this case. Looking at income, we find that model 2 has a low p-value. It is rejected. Models 1 and 3 have higher p-values, and the p-value for model 3 is much higher than the one for model 1. Next, we will look at RMSEA, which stands for the root mean squared error of approximation. For this indicator, we want a value lower than 0.08. This is considered acceptable, and lower than 0.05 is considered good. Model 1 has a value of 0.058, and Model 3 has a value of 0.030. It is smaller than Model 1, which indicates a better fit for Model 3. Next, CFI and TLI. For both of these indicators, we want a value as close as possible to 1. And we find that in both cases, the value is higher for Model 3 than for Model 1. So we concluded that in men, for income, Model 3 had the best fit. So the critical period model in men fit the data best for education and for income. Parameters in this model were statistically significant for education at ages 8, 9, and 14, 15. They predicted education at the next age. And the path coefficient between education at age 8, 9 was statistically significant and predicted physical activity at age 22, 23. Similar results were found for income. Let's look at the results for women. Model fit, education, small p-values for the 3 models. They were all statistically significant. High values for RMSEA, all above 0.1, which is considered poor fit. We concluded that none of the models that we tested fit the data well for education in women. For income, p-value was small for Model 2 and statistically significant. We rejected it. This leaves us with Models 1 and 3. RMSEA was lower for Model 1, and CFI and TLI were higher. This indicates that Model 1 fit the data best. Looking at perimeter estimates, education, we don't look at them because none of the models fit the data. Income, the accumulation of risk model with additive effects fit the data best. In this model, income at age 8, 9 predicted income at age 14, 15. Income at age 8, 9 predicted physical activity at age 22, 23 directly, but its direct effect was statistically significant, and its total effect, its total association, was statistically significant. However, its indirect effect from age 8, 9 through age 22, 23 to physical activity was not statistically significant. However, income at age 22, 23 was statistically significant itself. Only the indirect association was not significant. We concluded that in men, the critical period model fit the data best for both education and income. In women, the accumulation of risk model with additive effects fit the data best for income, whereas none of the models that we tested fit the data. This suggested that the association between SCP across the life course and physical activity during adulthood may be gender and indicator specific. Finally, we concluded again that structural equation modeling appeared to be a helpful tool in selecting among competing models in life course epidemiology. Conclusions. The first question we asked was, is there a life course association? Our systematic review concluded that yes, in 61.9% of the studies we had reviewed. Our original research paper in UK data concluded that yes, and our original research paper in Canadian data concluded that yes as well. Which theoretical model fit the data best? This table summarizes the results we found in our two original studies. In the study in Canadian data, for education and leisure time, the critical period model fit the data best for men. For income and leisure time, the accumulation of risk model with additive effects fit the data best for women, and the critical period model fit the data best for men. In the British data for social class, the accumulation of risk model with additive effects fit the data best in both men and women for leisure time, work, and transports. So overall, we concluded that there is a life course association between SEP early in life and physical activity during adulthood, and that the best model was probably the accumulation of risk model with additive effects. This is the model we can see on the right here. Which means that SEP at each point of the life course seems to be associated with physical activity during adulthood directly, irrespective of later exposure, which is an independent association, and indirectly through socio-economic position later in life, which is mediation. This suggests that perhaps we should intervene in childhood to increase physical activity levels and reduce social inequalities in physical activity and in health. Thank you.